I think there are people that I know outside of church that often they're just friends with people from school, and they're surprised that I have friends that are 20 years older than me and 20 years younger than me. I talk about some of the guys that, Hudson in particular, for example, does all our editing for us, and he's more than 20 years younger than me, about 20 actually, and they're like, well, what are you friends with that person for? And there's so many people that I'm friends with that I wouldn't have been friends with unless I went to originally youth group and Soul Revival, and now Soul Revival Church. Stu, I was going to ask you though, you mentioned the intergenerational aspect that plays into that. I think it's very true that for me to have, as I said earlier, to have friends that were older than me to begin with was quite a shaping experience. And even in the notes and your sub-themes, it says it was stabilizing and moderating. There's also that idea of making friendships and relationships more from a pre-industrial revolution rather than the industrialised schooling model as well. So I know you mentioned it before, but can you dig in a little bit deeper into how the intergenerational aspect informs that friendship? Welcome back, everyone, to the Shock Absorber podcast, and it's great to have you along with us, and always great to have you along my two fellow co-hosts. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And welcome, Stu.
Hello.
How are you? You guys well?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to speak for him.
Oh, okay. I
I'm
thought you were
fine.
just saying he's bad.
He's bad.
I am. He's terrible.
He's terrible.
Yes.
Well,
I am.
we were having a bit of terrible luck with your iPad. Just
Well, I
before
can't work
before we
out my
started
celestial settings. That's my problem.
Venus is in ascendance.
Well,
And,
got this app called Sky Guide, right? Because I had this thing that I thought, it's my birthday. Maybe I could ask for a telescope for
Is
my
today
birthday.
your birthday?
No, Saturday.
Oh, okay.
And so I said to Lou, what if I get a telescope? She said, well, they're really expensive and you would never use it. You'd use it once and you wouldn't be able to work it out. And I said, I might download an app. She said, that'd be a lot cheaper. So I downloaded an app and it's called Sky Guide, which is quite good, but it doesn't even know east, south or west.
You're having a
or
bit of
north.
trouble calibrating it.
Is that the word I need to calibrate it?
It sounds like it.
Because at the moment, according to this app, I'm looking at Ursa Minor.
Not Asia Minor.
No, Ursa Minor. Do you want me to tell you who Ursa Minor is?
Yeah. Sure. This is it a star or a planet? Is that
I
what
think it's a
saying?
constellation.
A constellation.
It includes Epsilon Ursa Minoris.
oh, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
And apparently it's 331 light years distance from us.
Oh, wow, that's wild.
And it shines with the energy of roughly 250 suns. It's a big star.
That is a big star. Is this a recent fascination with astronomy? Or
No,
is
I've always liked space, but I haven't really known a lot about it.
it's time to learn.
I just wanted to learn more. Yeah, I watch a lot of videos and things like that.
Okay.
I like SpaceX launches and things.
Yeah, okay.
I like rockets and
I always found space really hard to grasp in physics because it was so big. Like, how can something be, light years away? It means it takes a year for the light to go that far.
Yes.
I've also got another star here called Vega,
Yes.
which is out of one of my favourite movies because the aliens come from Vega in the movie Contact.
Okay, Contact.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know what movie that was. Is that Jodie Foster?
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
So it's one of the most famed stars in the sky, but I don't know if it's in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere because I haven't collaborated. Because Joel, you might want to tell everyone that I thought it was the summer solstice instead of the winter solstice.
The summer solstice.
Because the ad came up, oh, summer solstice. And then Joel said, are you in the right hemisphere?
That's how much I know about stars.
Well, I don't.
Got to be in the right hemisphere
either.
first. There you go.
I'm not one of those people who knows a little bit about something and then pretends to know. Like, I'm just happy to say I know a little bit about everything, not a lot about anything.
Yep.
But one of the most famed stars in the sky, Vega, is the luminary of the exquisite constellation Lyra. There you go. Something in that for all of us.
Is there?
Which represents the harp of the great mythical musician Orpheus.
Oh. Orpheus, is that Greek or?
Greek, I think.
Is that Greek
I
mythology?
think most of this stuff is Greek.
Okay.
Its name derives from an Arabic phrase, however.
Oh, okay.
According to this, not Greek.
It's not
It's
Greek?
very confusing, isn't it? Like, is it Greek? Is it Latin? Is it
Arabic?
Arabic? Which means swooping eagle.
Ooh.
Vega is one of the three brilliant stars that divide the northern heavens. There you go again. I'm in the northern hemisphere again.
Mm.
I don't think I'm in the south yet.
Need to travel to the southern hemisphere.
I set my location at Grace Point.
Okay.
That's in Sydney,
Yes.
which is in the southern hemisphere.
That is in the southern
So I'm not
hemisphere.
sure how to get this app to work. So if any of our listeners know how to get the app Sky, what's it called?
Star Guide or what do you
One of
call
them was called Star Guide, but I think this one's called something different.
it? Okay.
It's called.
Having a great time.
Oh, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, there you go.
Cool.
I don't know if
Have you
it's
had
got any
ever had a
relevance to anything.
telescope before? I mean, it's interesting that people
No.
study, as they call it, the heavens,
Mm.
and there's all these stars that are
I think I'm a bit more interested in planets than I am star systems. So all the new, like cheap telescopes that are kind of, there's digital telescopes now that are automatic, and you can lock them onto things and stuff. But they're good with constellations and stuff, but they're not very good with planets yet. So I think I might wait because I'm really interested in planets more than anything else. Actually,
okay.
I think
you got-
Jupiter's really
I
fascinating.
was going to, you have a favourite planet? It's Jupiter?
Jupiter probably.
Mm.
When I was a kid, it was Saturn because it had the first letter as my name. So yes. That's also why in play school I used to like the circle window the most in play school because I thought it started with an S.
Oh, really?
My name was Stuart.
Stuart
Yeah.
Circle.
Circle. Yeah, makes sense. Well, the other thing that I'm excited about, I'm not so excited about stars and planets, but is the World Cup has started today.
Oh
Mm.
yes,
at the
that's
time of
something worth
recording,
talking about.
and I'm very excited about it.
Mhm.
And I just love. I don't know what it is. I turned the first game on this morning. I was just like, this is so exciting. It's two teams that I don't know anything about. It was South Africa and Mexico,
Mhm.
and it was in the Azteca, which is the famous stadium of the 1970 and 1986 World Cup finals.
Okay.
And just there's a lot of history around it. It was the 1970 World Cup was the first World Cup in colour. So that's also a World Cup that Brazil won. One of the teams, they're considered one of the best World Cup teams ever, the Brazilian team in the 1970s with Pelé and many others. And there's this amazing photo that lots of people have seen where Pelé scored and his teammates holding him up and he's celebrating, and that's in the Azteca Stadium. And I think, I don't know what it is, but it's the world game of the World Cup. It just really excites me. And there's still a lot of games to go. As we were saying, there's I think 103 games to go because they've expanded from 32 to 48 teams, which I'm not a huge fan of. I think that dilutes the competition. But any World Cup memories for you guys before we get into the episode? You don't watch much football, Tim.
I don't know,
Mm.
no. But
Your
my
son's
son,
excited.
yeah, he's excited. Well, he was up at 5 a.m. this morning watching the Mexico-South Africa game.
Mhm.
So he was excited about that. We've got some German jerseys ready to go.
That's nice.
So
The new ones?
mixture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so that's exciting. So keen for that. Keen to watch a few Australia games, a few Germany games.
Most of the
Yeah.
kickoff times are quite good.
They're not bad. Yeah, there's a few 3 a.m.s, but
Yes.
the others are reasonable.
Yes, that's right. Well, the ones on the East Coast are a little bit better for us. I'll have
Okay.
to check that. But yes.
Mm.
Any World Cup memories, Stu? I know
Just tears and pain.
as an England supporter.
Well, Australia never used to get into the World Cup when I was a kid, so I used to go
Mm.
for England because my dad's English, and we used to lose all the time. But there was
Mm.
always a lot of promise, and then we'd fall over, particularly with the year Beckham took out one of, I think they were playing Argentina actually.
1998,
Yeah,
yep.
usually most of the pain and tears is related to Argentina.
Yes.
With the hand of God, that was a pretty tearful moment.
Mhm. That was 86, I think.
Yeah, but there's a lot of fun in it as well. Yeah, it's pretty good. I like the World Cup. It's good.
I love it. Like you've got two teams that would never play each other except for the World Cup.
Mm.
Like as we said, Mexico and
Yeah, I like that too.
yeah. I think that's brilliant. And there's like different, you can see different playing styles, and even back in, less so now, it's become pretty universal, but the tactical shifts would often happen in the game at a World Cup. So England 1966 were a big thing of that. They brought their two wingers back to play a 4-4-2, and that was a huge change. But everyone was playing what do they call a 4-2-4, and that was because Brazil started that earlier on. And so they see that, and it changes how football's played. Same with 1974 World Cup with the Dutch, with total football. Like I think that's really amazing that that's how people would, they're playing like this, and then they would influence the entire sport across the world. So, yeah, I'm excited. Hope you're excited too, guys, if you're listening.
It's coming home.
Yeah. That song's been around for quite a while. It still hasn't come home yet.
It's coming. Every year I say to myself, I'm not going to get excited this year, and then the week of the World Cup starting, I think Australia can get through to the next group, and I think England can win. So I'm a bit of an optimist.
You know, I think there's some truth in both of those things this time, but we'll have to see how it goes.
We're contenders.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, we'll see how it ends up. Let's talk about the next element or theme of your PhD, Stu.
Yes.
So we've done, so far, we have talked that a relational entry to countercultural community. That's what Soul Revival was. The second one was Christian identity formation through conversion and biblical discipleship. So people came because of the relationships, but stayed because they became Christians, which was, I enjoyed talking about that because it reminded me a lot of how my story played out. The third theme is ecclesiology of intergenerational friendship. Things that we like to talk about, friendship and intergenerational ministry. Where did you start? Where was the real key elements that came out of this actual theme for you?
Yeah, so the themes for this podcast are coming from the ethnographic interviews that Tim and I worked on. Tim did most of them because we wanted Tim to do it so that people could have the freedom to say what they wanted to without worrying about upsetting me. And I think that's the rationale there. And so people seem to relay that the fact that Soul Revival wasn't a standalone silo within the church was very helpful for their development. So they found that being connected to people who were just a little bit older and a little bit younger was really helpful, and also being connected to people of different generations was really helpful as well. I think that's the summary,
Yeah, and I think that's very true for me, is that having people slightly older than me wanting to spend time with me, it's like, oh, this is cool. You kind of, like, I suppose as a teenager, you're like, oh, some older people want to hang out with me. I must be cool.
Yeah,
like,
there's probably a bit of that.
It's a bit like that. But was that the same for you, Tim? You liked the fact that you had other people to hang out with, or other people that wanted to hang out with you that were older?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was a good mixture of generational diversity as well as generational peer connections as well. So I think both of those worked well, in that there was a significant number of peers in this intergenerational context. And I think the balance between those was really healthy. And as I've talked and trained a lot of people in intergenerational ministry and thought about, there are people who have huge youth groups with really, really large peer groups. So, and that they end up not integrating well long term, or there's a tendency not to, because the peer group was so strong that they never find expression of friendship outside of the peer group. And then there's people that I've talked to who have grown up in really tiny churches, of which there was no peers, and the only people they knew were intergenerational. And that had some benefits, but also there was a certain loneliness that came from that as well. And so, this is not by design, but it was, what happened as Soul Revival in the 90s and 2000s was that there were these strong peer groups coming through that had good intergenerational relationships. And so the balance of those two things, by God's grace, was quite healthy, and a lot of people were benefiting from that.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and very true in my case as well. The question I've got, I suppose, is, and there's a sub-theme here in the notes that we have around all the themes of the PhD, Stu, is that friendship as an ecclesial practice grounded in Christ. Can you explain to me what does that mean? I think I hear the word ecclesiology and I go, when it's explained to me, I go, that makes sense, and then I forget what it means.
Yeah, well, ecclesiology just means a theology of church, and Paul has a rich ecclesiology in his writings, for example. So in Ephesians, it's probably got the richest ecclesiology in the New Testament. And not all, but a really helpful way to think about that is probably that looking at all the different metaphors that Paul uses to help us to understand who we are in Christ. He uses the language that we're like a body, which is very common and well known, where Jesus is the head and we are all the parts of the body. He uses that also in Romans 12, where he talks about us being the body of Christ. He talks about us being a family of God, with God as our Heavenly Father. And in that metaphor, Jesus is our brother and the firstborn, and we are all heirs of the inheritance. That's a really interesting way of looking at being Christian as well. Like Paul's helpfully showing us two metaphors there that help us to understand different aspects of what it is to be in Christ and be part of the church. So ecclesiology is just all those. There's the building. There's what are the other ones? There's
royal priesthood, holy nation.
Holy nation. Yeah.
A lot of family metaphors.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a bit about how those metaphors connected with people in the 90s, and at a time where no-fault divorce was first beginning to impact and bite. Pretty much Gen X were the first generation to experience 50% divorce rates. So talking to kids about being part of the family of God, a lot of the young non-Christians particularly, and Christian kids too, were like, well, isn't family a failed project? Like, isn't that something that's hard for us to connect? It's something that's hard for us to connect with, considering that 50% of us don't experience ongoing situation where mum and dad are both, biological mum and dad are both in the same household. So it's not that we didn't teach family, we still did, but I was intrigued by the fact that Jesus, when he was talking to the disciples in John 15:15, talked about being friends. And I thought that was a pretty powerful metaphor. Now, some people have pushed back on me and said, is friendship an ecclesial category? Is it like what Paul's talking about in the New Testament letters, because he doesn't mention friendship? But to my mind, it's part of what I'm going to argue in the PhD, which will be fascinating because I'm sure I'll get pushback from what I'm going to talk about. But I think friendship is an ecclesial category because I think that the disciples weren't just a proto-church, they were the church. So they were the first church. And again, there's debate about when the church started. Some people say the church started with the disciples, other people say it was after Pentecost. There's all sorts of different different views on that. I'm hoping not to get bogged down in that debate too much in my theological chapter, but I think I'll probably reference that there is a debate and then try and move on to talk about friendship. But the idea of friendship was a powerful metaphor in the 90s because I think a lot of young people in the 90s used to see friendship as a major category of belonging. There was a lot of TV shows at the time around friendship being probably people's most significant community. There was the movie Cheers, where people came to their third place, which was a pub that they used to go and drink at, and they were all just barflies kind of sitting around in the bar. There was Seinfeld, which was another fun take on friendship. And they had families they belonged to, but the whole universe of their relationships kind of rotated around the friendships they had with each other. And then, of course, the show Friends was probably the most iconic version of that. And, they're all old shows now, but they were very, very popular in the 90s, I think, because they were looking at a significant relational category that people had in their time. So the sociologist in me thought, friendship's worth exploring, and the Bible, I'm not forcing that in my thoughts. I wasn't forcing that. It was actually Jesus saying, you were no longer called servants, you were called my friends. But his friendship was different to Friends, Seinfeld and Cheers, because Jesus wasn't basing his friendship on special interests, like we all like going surfing together, so we're friends. It was more about, if you are my friends if you do what I say. And that's the bit that I'm really excited about in that ecclesial category, because Jesus says, you're my friends if you love one another. We've talked before about how Matthew 22 was a significant verse when we first started. And in that, Jesus defines love when he says, love God with all your heart and love your neighbour as yourself. And quite interestingly, Jesus is challenged about that from the point of view of, he summarised the 10 Commandments basically, but the pushback to him was, well, who is my neighbour? So the religious teachers were trying to trick him and catch him out. But Jesus quite helpfully told the parable of the Good Samaritan and basically used that as an analogy to say everybody is your neighbour. So back in the 90s, there was this sense that you find 4 or 5 friends that are just like you, and in your sameness, you coalesce around a really tight friendship clique. And so going to church in the 90s, might be still like this now, I don't know, but in the 90s, people used to go to church like they'd go to the movies. They'd go with their friendship group and sit with their friends in church, and I definitely did that. as I was growing up as a teenager. I sat in the same pew with everyone, and that was like my third place, the pew itself in the church, because I didn't talk to anybody outside of that pew. I just maybe, oh, hi, how you going? I knew a few names. There was a few people who used to be my Bible study leaders or youth leaders in the past, but they were with their friends and they didn't talk to me either. And then after church, we'd all go and do something together. We didn't ask anyone else to come. We'd just do it ourselves. And so when new kids came, they used to try and get into our friendship group. Some of them got in, some didn't. I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time, how people got in and didn't get in. But people also left the friendship group. So I looked back on that and thought, oh, I don't know if that's what Jesus had in mind. What is the basis of his friendship group? And it's love. Love God, love others. And everyone is your neighbour. So instead of seeing church like the movies, we should see church as one big friendship group. Now, that was very controversial because straight away people said, what, are you expecting me to be friends with all these other people? Which I thought was funny because that's kind of the argument the religious leaders at Jesus' time had. Oh, do you expect me to be neighbours with everybody? Are you kidding me? So whether you use the word neighbour or family or body or friends, all of those metaphors have the same outcome, which is embrace otherness for the sake of Christ and do it for his glory and in his strength and in his power so that his kingdom and his church will grow. And I think that was kind of what the ecclesiology of friendship was. And the intergenerational aspect grew out of that because back in the 80s, young adults didn't hang out with teenagers and teenagers didn't hang out with young adults. So you could be in year 12 and you didn't know anybody who were young adults unless you went to the pubs, which interestingly is another podcast probably. But why that was different, I don't know, because when you see all these kids in my generation going to the pubs underage, they had a lot of friends in the pubs who were young adults. But in Christian circles, you had this very strong delineation between the young adult ministry and the youth ministry, and they didn't mix. And the young adults didn't really become friends with the teenagers and vice versa. And in a similar way, it was like that with kids and youth. You could be in year 6 and you didn't know anybody in year 7 at church because you were in two different worlds, like you were at primary school and high school, I suppose. So, yeah, I think our revolution or our ecclesiology was that what if we actually apply that to our friendships and actually be friends based on being Christian rather than be friends based on our special interests?
It'd be interesting just to dig in. It's funny just hearing you say that friendship is obviously something that's really important to us as humans. And so that would make me think that, God's obviously made us to be friends with each other. But it's interesting how it's it was almost, you got pushed back there, Stu. It's almost like such an important category that, I can't allow God to enter into that area of my life. And so I was seeing if you could, Tim, and you might be able to, with all your sociological research and background, is that why do you think that friendship is important? But it's funny that we've talked about this before, how kind of high school especially has funneled us into we should only be friends with people who are in our kind of age range, like even maybe like a year above us, a year below us, and that's about it. It'd be fascinating to try and dig into that a little bit because friendship's really important to me as a person. It always has been. And it is obviously us as humans. So how do we kind of look at that? And then obviously we want Jesus to transform those relationships, which I think is where you're heading with that. You're trying to involve that in the ministry. So I'll just get your thoughts on that, Tim.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy to be friends with people who are like us. So that's sociological reality. That it's the people, because we have things in common, things to talk about, shared interests, etc. You're right. The rise of industrialised schooling through the 20th century means that yes, young people spend the majority of their non-home, non-community life, like in their school, with people who are their exact age. We've presumed that means that it's the same stage, though there's a whole lot of pushback against that more recently. And also we've assumed with the industrialised schooling model assumes that because we can target education at particular ages and therefore stages, that's the most effective way to learn. And we've talked lots of times before about other positions on that. So, Vygotsky particularly is, one who says, no, it's a socio-cultural of people being with people who are unlike yourself that actually grows you and pulls you up into further maturity. So that there are other ways of seeing that. But that is true that we've assumed that you'll be friends with the people who have the most in common with you, and the layering of we've assumed that people who are the same age as you will be the ones who you're most in common with. But of course, we now are in a culture where that's just industrialised schooling is assumed. And so all of our listeners will have experienced schooling like that and realise that actually there's people in your class that you do share a lot in common with, and there's people in your class that you don't share a lot in common with. And you will have realised that there are people older than you and younger than you who actually have more in common than you. So it might be, football. It might be that you're in a class where there's not many other football fans who are excited about the World Cup, but there might be people older and younger than you that you actually have those conversations with, and you realise, the interest in football is more powerful than the fact that we all born in the same birth year, and that's the case with all these things. When it comes to the church, the extra layer on this, and we've talked about this last week, is that the most significant thing about a Jesus-shaped community is the Jesus bit. It's the conversion that happens through Christ, through the proclamation of God's word and the call for commitment to follow him. And so what was being helpfully reshaped and reimagined in the church, and particularly in Soul Revival community, was what if, rather than these other age brackets or other special interests, that actually Jesus is the most important thing. And it was an outflowing of the conviction that we actually believe that Jesus is the most important thing. And so therefore, if the Jesus is the most important thing for this 24-year-old leader and for this 14-year-old teenager that they're leading, then that is more important than the fact that one is interested in opera and one is interested in grunge, or one is interested in football and one is more interested in anime, or like the interest in Jesus. Because we want to say Jesus is the most important thing, then it's the interest in Jesus which is shaping this community. And therefore that allows the friendships to expand beyond your own special interests, and allows for the fact that the interests define me less than the connection we have with Jesus. And so that's the really powerful driving force of using friendship as an ecclesiology, or seeing the ecclesiological language of friendship in the Bible, because we can see that the friendship with Jesus that we have, so this is the John 15 bit, is Jesus calls us friends. There's an individual personal layer there. And therefore, if I'm friends with Jesus and you're friends with Jesus and Stu's friends with Jesus, then therefore, and we're in proximity with each other, therefore our friendship with each other is based on our mutual friendship with Jesus before any of the other interests that we might have, like stargazing or World Cup or whatever it might be. So that's what's being redefined there in a Jesus-shaped community, and using friendship as a real significant ecclesial category.
I think there are people that I know outside of church that often they're just friends with people from school, and they're surprised that I have friends that are 20 years older than me and 20 years younger than me. I talk about some of the guys that, Hudson in particular, for example, does all our editing for us, and he's more than 20 years younger than me, about 20 actually, and they're like, well, what are you friends with that person for? And there's so many people that I'm friends with that I wouldn't have been friends with unless I went to originally youth group and Soul Revival, and now Soul Revival Church. Stu, I was going to ask you though, you mentioned the intergenerational aspect that plays into that. I think it's very true that for me to have, as I said earlier, to have friends that were older than me to begin with was quite a shaping experience. And even in the notes and your sub-themes, it says it was stabilising and moderating. There's also that idea of making friendships and relationships more from a pre-industrial revolution rather than the industrialised schooling model as well. So I know you mentioned it before, but can you dig in a little bit deeper into how the intergenerational aspect informs that friendship?
Yeah, so for the shock absorber, I'm playing around with the idea that it's the third phase of the shock absorber, the intergenerational aspect, and the intergenerationalism comes from the Bible. It doesn't come from just what we would do naturally. So while people may have, in the first phase of the shock absorber, may have been looking for a new vision, or what did you call it today? A new
Captivating vision.
Captivating vision. I like Tim and I were talking about it this morning, and he said that phrase that I thought was really good. I'm going to think about that. Like, what is a captivating vision for a new reality, a new countercultural reality? That was kind of the first phase. The second phase was a lot of young people connected with that captivating vision through relationships. So a lot of people who were already excited about what was going on invited people to come along. And then of the people who stayed and really committed and got involved, there was it was because they were converted. They actually became a Christian and met Jesus through listening to the talks and becoming a Christian, or actually got really excited about being a Christian when they weren't that excited about it before, and they got more serious about it. And then there was an emotional response to it, which new social movement theorists like James Jasper talk about, the fact that all movements have that relational aspect, that when people are actually captivated by a vision, then they connect with each other and there's a sense of belonging. So that sense of belonging and identity gets stronger through an understanding that they're part of the church. They've actually part of Christ's vision for the future. That's the captivating vision. So once they're captivated by that, then they're open to not live the same way as everybody else lives. And so the Bible teaches us not just to be neighbourly with people our age. That's been, as Tim eloquently just said, that's been a result of the industrialisation of relationships that has taken place through the Industrial Revolution. So efficiency, for example, is a higher priority today than it was pre-industrialisation, because now it's like not only producing an item, but it's how many can we produce, how quickly can produce them, and how much money can we make from those items. And so we've lost a bit of artisanship. The artisan of the pre-industrial revolution has been replaced by the machines. So the power looms of Manchester's thriving metropolis in the early 1800s replaced the cottage industries that were producing beautiful crafted garments and rugs and all sorts of things from cottage industries, from women making those items as a business in their home. And so actually the first reaction against industrialisation was a female-driven Luddite movement, which was actually the beginnings of modern feminism in my mind. I think it was a beginning of women standing up saying, no, we don't agree with this. And women were burning down factories in Manchester because they were taking their jobs, but also taking the soul and craftsmanship out of the product they were producing. And so 8-year-old girls were standing for 8 hours a day in front of a power loom, and there's terrible photos of young girls in bare feet with a hunched back at the age of 10 because they've been standing up for so long that they've now, their spines malformed.
Yeah, right.
So that sort of industrialisation, though, has become so much part of our every day that we don't even notice it anymore because we've never seen anything different, really. And in fact, there's some curiosities that we come across every now and again when we come across people from less industrialised societies, particularly people who migrate to Australia from other contexts that haven't been as industrialised as Europe has been. So, when we see culture from Vietnam or from Philippines or from different places, we think it's terrific to see even Italians, families, first generation Italian families getting together to get all the tomatoes that they've grown and then make the tomato sauce for the year. We go, oh, isn't that nice? That's great. But we don't do that kind of thing anymore. We just go to the supermarket and buy the tin tomatoes off the shelf because we're into efficiency. And so when it comes to friendship, I think the pedagogy that Tim was talking about with the education system has dominated our thinking about young people's formation. So we look at young people learning in primary school as a good example of how we can structure the church's context for children learning. And then the youth ministries sort of come out of a high school kind of environment, and the youth ministry, traditional youth ministry models that we still use today come from the 1950s, when people deliberately lent into high school culture and as a result created these sort of little siloed echo chambers of Christian experience that meant that you could go to church for 10 years and never go to a funeral because sometimes people do pass away when they're teenagers, but if you're in an intergenerational context, then you're going to be in a context where your elders are passing away, and it's quite a regular experience. Yet the other problem was that we siloed our old people into a traditional service because of their preferences for music, particularly, and for their traditional preferences. And so they didn't. Some congregations haven't heard a baby cry for 10 years. So what we're thinking when we start Soul Revival is it's counterintuitive, because intuitively we should have just created the relational space for young people to come and be Christians together as young people. Yeah, meet Christ and have that great moment of vision that is captivating them, but then express all of their Christianity pretty much in that little bubble of being teenagers. But at Soul Revival, we thought, what if we actually take Jesus at his word and see everybody as our neighbour, not just people our age, and start with getting young adults and teenagers to be friends with each other in appropriate ways, so that the young adults were their leaders first and their friends second, but they actually were friends. And because teenagers very quickly become adults, you only have to be friends in that context for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden you're all pretty much in the same category as a young adult anyway. So that worked, despite people saying they didn't think it would work, but it took commitment to get that to work. And the theory that I'm working on at the moment is that commitment comes from our theology. It doesn't come from our desire for community or our love for community, because community is actually hard work. So there's this aspiration in the 90s for this perfect community of group of friends who are all really good and close and everyone gets on really well. But actually, in reality, it's pretty hard to find that. And to actually have a group of people that are really good friends means you have to sacrifice your own preferences. And so the gospel gives us the reason and the validation for that sacrifice, because Jesus commands us to be living sacrifices, to take up our cross and carry them. And Paul calls that in Romans 12, be a living sacrifice, lay down your priorities for the sake of the body. So we can't really access that community and belong to that community without first belonging to Christ, having our worldview changed, and then actually expressing that sacrificial expression. It's very uniquely Christian. And so that's why a lot of teenagers who stay at Soul Revival are the ones who had that conversion moment when they were very convicted to follow Jesus personally, and they also, or if they'd already were a Christian when they came to Soul Revival, they had a conviction that the gospel's where the action is, because a lot of other models that we've experienced up till the 90s were the actions in the world, not in the church. So to actually think that the action's in the church because Jesus is in the church is a very seismic moment for young people, and it can be a lifelong adventure after that point.
And I think so many of the things you're mentioning there and what we've talked about in this episode is about being countercultural.
Yeah.
As a result, like Jesus is making us countercultural because he's very countercultural himself.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think the last thing I thought worth touching on for the coming out of the research, and I think both of you, it'd be really important to get an answer from both of you on this. Tim, you can go first. So it was kind of another thing was young people having a voice through being listened to through that intergenerational and friendship model. I wonder, Tim, it might be even from your personal experience, that what do you think the appeal in that is? Were young people not being listened to somewhere outside of where they were coming along to Soul Revival? Or did they even, I don't know if I realised that I was being listened to. I think that's the other thing, until later. So I'm interested to see what you think about that. Why is there an appeal for young people to be listened to by generations that are older than them?
For the young person?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the appeal from the young person is that you're taken seriously. And what we have institutionalised since the 1950s and the emergence of adolescence as a distinct category of growing up and particularly a unique consumer category for music and movies and pop culture particularly. which rises with the high schools, institutionalised high schools. So all this is happening around the mid-20th century. And what we institutionalise from there is this generation gap and the expectation that old people don't get young people and young people don't get old people. And so we've institutionalised since the mid-20th century this antagonism between generations. So we just assume that young people have nothing to learn from old people.
And they're just going to be rebellious.
And they're going to be rebellious, they're going to rebel against what they brought up on, that old people will shake their head and tut-tut at young people, which is not an invention of the 20th century. Like there's this really famous, hilarious quote from Socrates where he goes, oh, the young people of today, they're awful, they don't listen to their elders, blah, blah, blah. So it's not...
Despisers for the next generation.
Yeah.
Not despiser, what's the word?
Yeah,
he's given up on.
Yeah, given up. Yeah.
So you mean Socrates, the famous
Socrates.
football player?
Socrates.
Socrates.
No, so
It's in Bill and Ted's
Bill and
excellent.
Ted, yeah. So there is. That's not new, but the institutionalizer, and again because of the corporate consumer nature of young person culture as distinct from old person culture, was really extrapolated a lot from the mid-20th century onwards. And again, there's history of rock and roll, history of movies, those kind of things play into that a lot. So when you then get young people who expect not to get on with old people, they expect old people to look down on them, they expect old people to not understand them, they expect to have distinct culture and not to be listened to then have the reverse of that, actually have warm, welcoming community of old people who are genuinely interested in them for their sake, who are genuinely interested in what they're doing, who are putting off their own preferences for the sake of the preferences of young people, and genuinely listening to them is a little bit odd. Like the young people goes, oh, this is strange. Like, why are these people interested in me? Why do they keep trying to have conversations with me? Why do they keep asking me what I'm interested in? Why does the things that I say I'm interested in and I like and I don't like shape the culture and the community that we're having? And as you experience, you may not be immediately aware of those things. We try to make people aware of those. I remember as a leader, we would say in the commitments meetings particularly, like, you guys are helping shape this, or what are you guys enjoying? What are you learning? What can we do better? So, and asking them, generally taking on their feedback and generally shaping the groups around what their interests were and what they were saying. So that was really significant. So I think that is a huge part of the appeal. And one of the things that I remember as maybe older teenager and certainly as a youth leader is Stu talking about, I think it was, is it a Mark Center quote about, no one in the church takes you seriously until you're 40.
Yeah, adults don't listen to the young people in the church until they turn 30, 40, something like that.
Yes, yeah.
It's in 4 Views of Youth Ministry.
Right. And Stu very explicitly saying to us as youth leaders and as to teenagers themselves, we don't want that to be true of this church. So this church is going to be one where we're not going to wait for you to be 30 until you listen to us. Now, the extra layer on top of this as we went on, it wasn't so much a case necessarily in the 90s, but as you entered into the mid-2000s and certainly to the 2010s, that you get the rise of Web 2.0, and you get young people learn to be contributors and creators of culture far more than they had earlier. So the creation of early social media and then YouTube and all of the early social media around that was that all of a sudden young people are expecting to create, expecting to produce, and expecting to have voice into this new emerging media. And so I think we had tried to institutionalise, which was to take young people seriously, I think had already got off to a good start and was able then to adapt well into this new emerging youth culture, which was all about I create, I make on Minecraft, I make on YouTube, I make on Instagram, I make on all these MySpace, and other people take my contribution seriously. And so I remember talking about this when we did training at YouthWorks and other places of, if you're not giving voice to young people in your church, they're getting listened to on all these other digital spaces. So don't be surprised that they go, well, why would I bother here when actually I have communities of listening to me and I have communities of voice and acceptance in these other spheres. And so it's not really about competing with culture, but it's just, young people are used to expressing themselves. And so it makes sense that churches that allow for that expression within their church communities as well will be able to tap into some of that creativity and will give space for young people to feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's interesting you said there that Stu got up and said, we want you to be listened to. And Stu, I'm going to ask you, as we wrap up the episode for this particular theme, is why did you want that to be the case? Why did you want young people to be listened to?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's probably an hour answer. I'll try and be brief. I think we were consumers of a product when we were growing up. We didn't have any say over that. And so when we got to the age of 18, we were still coming to a youth group that was playing 1970s youth group games in 1989. And so my friends would be going up the pub to see the Angels play at Carringbar Inn. And I'd say, do you want to come to youth group? And they're like, what are you going to do? Oh, we're going to play a spoon game. Oh, yeah, cool. I might just go to the pub. So it was just super lame in our mindset to start off with. We did think maybe having a relevant kind of group was the answer, but we found that didn't work. And what we did find was the relationships we have in Christ, sharing those with other people was what really worked, I think, if I look at that. But a relationship is a two-way thing. So I'm looking a lot at the bottom-up voices of young people in the podcasts and in the, all that sort of stuff. But also having a moderating adult voice is actually really good and healthy as well. So we had a youth council in the early days of the youth ministry, and we used to design a program. Before I was actually paid to be the youth minister, I was just a volunteer, and the youth council kind of worked as a youth minister. It was kind of cool. We had a couple of parents and a warden, and we used to go and hang out, and we used to have dinner at someone's house, and it was always very relational. But then we'd get the program out, and we'd have a crazy idea about something, and they go, yeah, it's really good, but, if you did it this way, that could kind of be a bit dangerous. And we're like, yeah, I didn't think of that. So then we'd sort of go, oh, we want to do a youth camp, and it's about 5 hours drive away in a valley in the middle of blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, maybe that's a bit long to go driving. It increases the risk of having an accident. What if you did something an hour away? And we're like, oh, yeah, I suppose. So that moderating voice was really quite helpful. And that's the wisdom of the shock absorber, the strength of the shock absorber. So taking the flexibility that young people can input into what we're doing, but then having that moderating voice still. It's not an either or. It's not just listen to young people or just listen to older people. It's do both. And I think that's why we wanted to do that, because we wanted to have young people say stuff. But we as young people knew we didn't know everything. So it'd be a bit dumb if we tried to reinvent Christianity from the grassroots up again. There's no need to do that. We've been around for 2,000 years. So there are good traditions that we can take on from the past. And I suppose we didn't have the hubris of youth that suggested that we knew better than everyone else. But we did have a excitement and a fun and an energy that our elders captured and wanted us to have fun. And I was just in a conversation yesterday with someone about e-bikes, and someone was like, I saw 30 kids right across the intersection on e-bikes. And I'm just like, oh, man, that would be heaps fun. That sounds like a little bikey gang. I reckon those kids must have really enjoyed that. Did they break the law? And they're like, no, not really. Like some of the last few went across a red light. I'm like, well, that's not good and that's not safe. But to demonise the whole e-bike thing is like demonising surfing. And I've got an article from the Leader from 1958 that says the surfers at Cronulla have had enough. These board riders have to go, and they're running us over, and they're taking up all the change rooms, and there needs to be laws. And I thought the latest expression of youth culture in Solent Shire is e-bikes. Like there's kids riding around like they're no tomorrow. And sure, they're on footpaths and doing wrong things and doing monos, but they've got their own little culture. Like doing a mono on an e-bike is kind of like hanging 10 in the 50s on a surfboard, or getting a tube in the 90s on a surfboard. It's like it's part of their culture. And so I think there's a sense where we can see youth as a problem that we have to fix, and that's why we don't listen to them, because we think they're immature and they're all crazy young people on
It's
their
hard.
e-bikes.
It's hard, right?
Or we go, wow, how fun's that? Like they're just getting a little community going. They've got a bit of belonging and identity and a bit of purpose in their life. They're not all in front of their computers every day playing computer games. They're actually out on the streets hanging out. I don't know if it's all bad. It's kind of good. So, yeah, that's why I think I listen to young people, because young people have been such a transformative force in history. And Mark Center, again, is the one who said that youth ministry is a cycle of movements. Every 50 years there's a new way of doing youth ministry that comes from young people or the people who minister to them, and it revolutionises the way we do church. So, yeah, I think that's a really healthy thing about the teenage years particularly. There's something creative about that time in your life where you're open to new things.
It feels like similar to parenting. You didn't want to have, if you're leading a group, you didn't want them to have the same experience that you had growing up in terms of as a young Christian. I think that was probably part of it too.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also like, let's do some new things together. Like, I'm really excited about, like, I remember when the first kids came along, it sounds a bit lame now, but they brought some Jesus beads. We're all like, that's fun. Why don't we do that? Because everyone was wearing beads, and these kids are saying, this is something we think our friends would get. And then all of a sudden there's thousands. What was fun about it was there was hundreds of kids sharing their faith. And it wasn't a course, and they didn't have to go and get trained on how to share your faith, and didn't have to read a book, 2 Ways to Live. They just chuck some colours on their wrist, and their mates go, oh, what's with the colours? Oh, that just means Jesus made everything and we should be Christians. Yeah, righto, how'd you become a Christian? Oh, you just say sorry for sinning and God forgives you, and come to Soli's on Saturday night. Yeah, righto.
Everyone spoke like puberty blues.
It was worse than that. I'm toning it down.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that sounded stoned all the time, because some of them were all stoned all the time.
Yeah, right.
Like, dude, into Jesus. Yeah, man.
Well, there you go.
A lot of
A lot of
when people prayed, they said, Lord, yeah. It's a lot of fun.
But I think that's the important part, is that it's interesting, your observation of that was what, like a really important time. Obviously, beginnings of Sorrowville, and seeing those young people that probably may not have known Jesus. And
do you know, maybe for next week, and we're going to come to it, but just to get people thinking, the problem with that is when it's organic and it's relational, it works. But when people feel like an expectation is on them to be friends with other people, that's when it doesn't work. So the limitation of the shock absorber is when you institutionalise it, which is exactly what Centre says. Everything that gets institutionalised is then limited in its effectiveness.
Oh, I see. Well,
that's somewhere we can go next. I didn't want to steal your thunder about that.
No, it was a great way to finish. Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Stu.
Thank you, Joel.
It's been great. And you can contact me, joel@shockabsorber.com.au, if you want to get involved in anything we're talking about, or check out our website, shockabsorber.com.au. But with that, we will finish. And I really appreciate everyone listening and watching. I was going to say watching and listening. I got my words mixed up, but it's been great. Thank you very much, guys. And we'll finish with one way.
One way.